How you doing? It's your boy Brogi Naric back again for another episode of BUMP Psychology. And in this video, I'm going to be giving a review of the recent episode of Vice TV's Dark Side of the Ring, The Double Life of Chris Kanyon, which recently aired. And before I get into this video, don't forget to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel, and also keep watching because why not? So this recent episode of Dark Side of the Ring focused on the wrestler known as Chris Kanyon, who I knew of, but I was not familiar with his work. He was mainly in WCW and in the early part of WWE during like the early part of the invasion angle and the ruthless aggression era. And I didn't grow up watching WCW, so I was not too familiar with this guy. And learned a lot about him. This Chris Kanyon, died. He was born in January 4th, 1970, and died in April 2nd, 2010. He was 40 years old, and he was beloved in the business. He's considered to be, he is an innovator of the modern sort of indie style of wrestling, which I had no idea of his contribution to the industry. And but he also was a gay man in the wrestling business, and he had to keep that a secret. And the burden of he felt he had to keep it a secret, and the burden of keeping it a secret really affected his life. He definitely suffered from some mental and emotional instability through his life, which really hampered his career. Because if honestly, after watching this, it's like he was a man who started wrestling or was born into wrestling in the wrong generation. Like if he was like a couple of years, like a generation or two removed from when he started, he would have been a big star in the business. So Chris Kanyon, aka Christopher Morgan Colchis, I think that's how you say his name. He was born in Queens, New York. He grew up in Queens, New York. They said he had this thick New York accent, but he also had a lisp, so that kind of made him subconscious about doing promos and things. And he was raised Catholic, and the episode goes into how that greatly affected him and how he had to once again keep his sexuality a secret. He felt he couldn't let people know because that would just ruin his life or his career. It was a big pressure on him. And we're also introduced throughout this episode, we're introduced to different people that work with him and were friends of his. And the MVP of this episode was James Mitchell, aka the Sinister Minister, aka James Vanderberg, who was a wrestling manager. I mainly know him from TNA and Impact, which I didn't watch any of that, but he kind of looks like devil demon looking guy. So if you see him, it's like the eyebrows look like that. But he was a friend of Chris's and his manager in WCW, and he talks about how like Chris would portray himself as this New York tough guy, and he hated gay people, as he said, hated the queers and all of that. And he was the one that got Chris started in the professional wrestling business because one of his friends, his childhood friends that they had in the episode, what was the guy's name? Raphael Morphy, who worked with him in WWE and is a AEW executive, talked about how Chris would always like to play wrestle as a kid, and he was a big fan of wrestling. But James was the one that got him into the business by introducing him to Fabulous Moolah, where he started training with the Fabulous Moolah. And Fabulous Moolah is one of the pioneers in female wrestling, and she mainly only trained women wrestlers, but Chris is one of the few guys she started to train. And they told the story of how when he would train, he got his ass beat by Mae Young. Mae Young is another pioneer of wrestling. She's kind of like the Betty White of wrestling, for better or worse terms. And she would beat the shit out of Kanyon while he was training, which I thought was hilarious. Mae Young was a tough old bitch. So they're telling, various stories, other wrestlers like DDP, who was a friend of his, and he worked with Kanyon and WCW and was a friend. Chris Jericho was another person they interviewed who talked about a few of his interactions with Kanyon and how Kanyon was, once again, an innovator and kind of fun to be around. You couldn't really say a bad word about him. And there's a lot of these crazy stories that really get into the dark side of not just the industry, but like Kanyon as a person. Because even though he was a nice guy, he also had these crazy outbursts where he would start losing it. But James Mitchell talks about there was an incident we had to cover for Kanyon because while he was moving with his cousins, a box of his gay porn broke open and the cousin saw it, so he had to cover and say that it was Mitchell's, and Mitchell's gay and tried to put a prank on him. So, Mitchell had to call up and say, "Oh, my bad. I left some stuff with Ken, to try to cover for him." Crazy incident. That was how Mitchell, or at least that's how Kanyon came out to Mitchell, and Mitchell was like, "All right, so I guess I have to help keep this a secret from everyone else." They would work together as a great combo, but there's the darker side where Kanyon would have these crazy outbursts and would start to abuse Mitchell. Like he mentioned, there was a moment where he had this outburst and he started elbow him in the car and got out of the car and kicked the door and broke the windshield, kicked off the mirrors and all of that. Yeah, he talked about how one day he was upset and he got into it with him and started choking him and almost like choked him out, but eventually he would snap out of it and start apologizing. Like there was clearly some weird, mental problems going on with this guy. And but then he also talked about some of the weird tendencies that Kanyon would have. Like he said he would spend the time with him for like a week or like almost a month, and there would be days where Kanyon would just sit in a room and he would have these papers and he would just restack them and stack them over and over for like hours, or he would lay in the bed and stay in his room for like 2 days, 3 or 4 days. He talks about how he had this crazy like computer set up and he would message these various gay guys on the internet, but then he would like print out transcripts of the messages in the different message rooms and keep them in a box, and he would carry them with him. And Mitchell would call it Pandora's box as a joke, and the guys didn't really mess with it until it kind of, from what I've heard from other interviews, then until it became a joke, and then people would just kind of wonder like, what's with the box? What's with the box? What's with the box? So he was a very popular guy with the group. His career started to look better. He was in a tag team. I remember they said he was in a tag team. Then he started getting shine as a singles. And then this crazy storyline came up called the Blood Runs Cold storyline in WCW. And it was Eric Bischoff's attempt to build off the popularity of the Mortal Kombat video game, which was super hot at this point in '96. And so he created the characters Glacier, which was basically Sub-Zero, and Mortis, which apparently was a combo of Scorpion and Reptile, was the inspiration. And Kanyon portrayed this character, and it's a goofy look, but it's a goofy gimmick, but it does look dope. Like it's pretty dope outfit if you look up the Mortis costume. And I wasn't familiar with it. I knew what it was, but I never seen it, and I recently watched some matches. They were fine matches, but watching Kanyon's matches, you definitely see he's pulling off some really cool, really dope moves. And he's a big guy too. He's like 6'4", and he's pulling off some really awesome offense that you see a lot more nowadays, which was completely new at the time he was doing it. And it's like, wow, he really was an innovator. Like he was low key like an innovator. And they mentioned how like things were going good, but of course, while this goofier stuff is happening, the NWO is also happening and it's getting popular. And once that got really big, then that changed a lot of things. And WCW was starting to be a little less gimmicky and cartoony and to be more attitude and reality type of wrestling characters. And Chris Kanyon just after leaves the Mortis gimmick and becomes just Kanyon. He's got his gimmick or his catchphrase, "Who's better than Kanyon?" And which I was not familiar with, but it's pretty funny. And he was talking about how he worked on the movie Ready to Rumble, which is not a great movie, but like in terms of just like nostalgic and like wrestling films, is one of the best. It's focuses on the WCW guys. Chris Kanyon was Jimmy King's stunt double, and he was also helping with choreographing some of the wrestling in the movie. So he had a talent for training people, and they talk about like how that's what he started to do later on in his career. But they also mentioned that Kanyon loved to throw parties. His the place he stayed at, he turned into like a beach bar nightclub and had chicks all over the place and guys hanging out. And Mitchell tells the story that there was one time when he was having one of these parties, this chick had mentioned to him that she thinks that Kanyon's gay because he wasn't really interacting with the women like that. Mitchell tells Kanyon. Kanyon starts to gets all paranoid, and so he comes up with this crazy idea. He tells Mitchell, like, hey, get a random chick and get my camcorder. We're going to film a porno, and I'm going to show it to the boys just so they'll know, I guess, that I'm not gay or whatever. And they got it together, but Kanyon didn't show up. So Mitchell, as he tells the story, he said he gave the girl the mortise mask, and they shot it themselves. And he showed it later the next day. He showed it to Kanyon. Kanyon laughed at it, but then Kanyon started to get upset, and he lashed out at Kanyon. Kanyon lashed out at Mitchell once again and threw him around. And then Mitchell says that he pulled out a fucking .45 pistol because he was ready to blow his ass away because he was tired of that abuse. And he threatened to shoot him, but Kanyon still came at him and told him to put it down. They calmed down, and he mentions like he was prepared to shoot him. Like if he got rough with him, especially if he started choking him again, he was prepared to blow that man away. So it's like it got intense. It's some intense shit. But yeah, it's wild. The wrestling business is pretty fucking crazy sometimes. Then of course once WWE bought WCW, he was a part of the Invasion storyline, and his career started to get a little bit better early on. He was a 2-time tag champion. He was a WCW tag team champion with him, Bam Bam, and DDP. Then he won the WWF tag team champs with just Kanyon and DDP. And then he also became a United States champion in the WWE. And, his career was starting to look a little better, And then he had this shoulder injury, and he was recovering from that. He was taking steroids to try to hurry up and recover, but he fucked it up somehow and ended up getting a blood infection due to the steroid needle or whatever. And he had to get healed from that. So he was out for a while. And he, once again struggled with that, but, because he was on the high, and then it went down for a little bit, but he recovered. And they talk about, they mentioned the Young Bucks at this point, the Young Bucks, Bat and Nick Jackson, from wrestlers from AEW, also fans of Chris Kanyon, but they were friends and they were trained by Kanyon as well, and early on in their career. And they talk about how there was a show when he returns, when Chris Kanyon returns to WWE, they had him in this weird angle where it was a feud, I think it was between Undertaker and Kurt Angle on SmackDown. And Undertaker comes in, it's this big wooden box that Paul Heyman, he's working with Angle, he's giving it to the Undertaker, and he opens the box and he hears it's friggin' Chris Kanyon in this wooden box as a present, dressed as Boy George, and singing "Do You Really Want to Hurt Me" with this exaggerated lisp. And it's very weird, very odd angle, and the fans are like, what the fuck is this? I don't even know if the majority of them recognized it was Chris Kanyon. And then they talk about how this led to a moment where Undertaker just beats the shit out of Kanyon. They clearly buried this guy, beats the shit out of him, crazy chair shots. And the way they framed it in the show is not as bad if you actually watch the angle. If you look it up on YouTube, it's a little different from the way they shot it in the show. But it's he comes out of the box, he starts singing, Undertaker's kind of looking like, what the fuck is this? He turns his back to him. Kanyon then jumps him, hits him with the microphone, and starts attacking him. Taker gets back, and then that's when Taker starts attacking him, but he just unloads on this guy. And they talk about the chair shots being brutal. Once again, watching the chair shots weren't really that bad compared to just that's what chair shots were at the time. But I will say that final chair shot to the head, that was ridiculous. That was unnecessary, because you can watch it, he's, with a chair shot, usually if a wrestler wants to take a chair shot, they usually make sure that they face their back to the person. And that's what Kane was doing. He's a professional. But that chair shot to the head, that was a bit much. that was a bit much. Like, that was like, what the fuck? Um, and yeah, this was clearly a burial. And he started to slowly fall down the card after that, and eventually he was fired from WWE. And as I said, this was obvious hazing from WWE management, and the guy Raphael Morphy, he denies it. He claims that like he has a hard time believing that WWE would waste time and resources just to humiliate someone. And anyone who's been watching WWE for at least 5 years knows that that's bullshit. Some examples would be Dean Ambrose and EC3, how they didn't let EC3 talk. They had Dean Ambrose potentially going to wrestle Nia Jax to embarrass him, but of course they didn't go down that route. You got Joey Styles, who was getting bullied by JBL and ended up punching him. Justin Roberts was getting bullied. You got The Miz when he started. They, would mess with his clothes, forcing him to eat outside because he couldn't eat in the locker room. Of course, you got Daniel Puder, who shot on Kurt Angle, and as punishment, when they had him in the Royal Rumble, it was him, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, and Hardcore Holly, and they just chopped the shit out of that guy for like a straight 10, 15 minutes. So, yeah, I call bullshit on that assessment. But, so once he was fired, he started working on the indies, and this is when he gets to like the second part of his career where he starts influencing various young wrestlers, and he's training here and there. Kanyon also starts to get treatment for his bipolar disorder, and eventually starts to come out to his friends and family, and and it goes well. People accept it. Some people secretly knew, but by the time he was willing to accept it, he realized that like it's not that big a deal. We got an interview from Brian Cage, who's a wrestler, works in AEW currently. He was another fan and friend and trained by Chris Kanyon. He talks about how he had this early match at this very small promotion. Chris Kanyon had called him up, was like, "Hey, I want to show up," and they had this match at this the main event, and Kanyon put Cage over, and he was, it was a nice thing. He was a professional guy, and they showed the actual footage of him doing it and how the crowd reacted. It was a really cool moment seeing him talk about that. So we also get into another wrestler, Luke Hawx, who I'm not familiar with. He's probably been in WWE and I don't recognize him. I don't know, but I'm not familiar with this guy. He was another guy who was a friend and a fan and was trained by Kanyon. He even has like a Mortis tattoo on his arm, and he talks about how like Kanyon, he lived in Louisiana, and after Hurricane Katrina happened, his living area got devastated, and Kanyon let him stay with him, and some other people stayed with him. And he talks about how Kanyon would stay up for days. He wouldn't sleep. He tells him that there was this one point where Chris got paranoid, and he claimed he saw some aliens and while he was driving, and he wanted to break into this like Scientology building, but like everyone knows this didn't happen because he hadn't left the house at all, and he was like wanting to leave the house and go burn down or attack the Scientology building. So Luke and some of the guys staying with him like tied him down and waited for him to fall asleep, and when he woke up the next day, he completely forgot about it. It's like, man, it was that guy has serious problems. And like I said, he started getting treatment, and he eventually decided to contemplate coming out as an openly gay wrestler. And he did come out publicly at this pay-per-view with DDP in 2006. But by the time he came out, him being a gay wrestler wasn't as taboo as he thought it was. It was 2006. WWE already had Orlando Jordan, who had came out and presented as an openly gay wrestler, which I do remember when that was revealed. It was a little awkward, but then it was like, okay. And Jason Jordan didn't really last long in the business after that. Not Jason Jordan, Orlando Jordan. And I liked Orlando Jordan. He was working with, I liked him when he was like JBL's JBL's Virgil. He was a fun side character, but once he broke away from JBL, it was kind of just downhill from there. But Kanyon, I guess he figured it would be a bigger deal. He did want to be like a role model, and I think that's admirable of the man. and he was, just I guess not to the degree he had hoped he would be. And they talk about these times he tried to get back into WWE. He sent letters and would call the office. He would pop up at random shows and I guess heckle from the sides. They talk about how he climbed a turnbuckle after WrestleMania 20 had finished, which was very odd. And it didn't work out. He didn't get rehired. He then started becoming a regular on the Howard Stern show. And, he got to be a little more open with people and be funny. But he also got to talk about and shit on WWE, which is what wrestlers usually do when they're on a public forum that allows them to do so. And they show a clip of young John Cena saying that, Chris Kanyon was fired because he just wasn't any good. Which people was trying to cancel Cena for that, 15 years after the fact. Like, who gives a fuck? That's just his opinion. Flair had also called in. They had a debate, and he talked about how he basically reiterated the same thing Cena said. And Flair recently came out because he's under fire, especially after the last episode. He recently came out and said, "Look, I like Kanyon. I was kind of just towing the company line," which is essentially what Cena was doing too. It's like they were just saying what Vince, what they felt Vince wanted them to say, because Kanyon was claiming like, "Oh, they fired me because I was gay," and and that's not. And that's debatable. I don't think he was fired because he was gay. If you look at the clip of Kanyon on the Howard Stern show, when he's talking to Flair, they do mention like Kanyon was a little, he would say certain things and you weren't 100% sure if he was telling the truth or not. And there was a bit of the clip where he's talking to Ric Flair and he's like, there's a lot of secretly gay guys in the business. They just don't come out, and I'm the only one to come out, and that's why I was fired. And he says, like, your friend Arn Anderson, he's secretly gay, and you've known this for years. And Flair's like, I know nothing about that. And I'm like, Arn Anderson, like, of all the people to claim is gay, Arn Anderson? I'm not too sure about that one. I'm not too sure about that one. But I was just surprised that that's what he said. He said Arn Anderson. I'm like, Arn Anderson is gay? Like, what? Unless there's something I don't know. But I thought that was kind of crazy that he just pulled Arn Anderson. I think he just said it just to try to piss off Flair. But and then that's the thing. I don't think he was fired because he was gay. I think Vince fired him because he didn't think he was any good. He couldn't make any money with him, because as a lot of people know, Vince, has no problem with a gay person. One of his right-hand men was gay, and that's Pat Patterson. But the reason Pat Patterson stayed around so long is because Vince knew how to make money with Pat Patterson. Pat Patterson was a great trainer. He was a great idea guy. He would come up with finishes for matches. He's the guy that created the Royal Rumble. So I think if Vince could have seen more of an upside in Kanyon, he would have kept him. But he didn't see a good upside in him, so he got rid of him. So I don't necessarily think Vince got rid of him because he was gay. Would have Vince continued to pick on him because he knew he was gay? Absolutely, he would have. As they showed in the show, you got the Adrian Adonises, you got the Gold Dusters, you got the Chuck and Larry bullshit. Not Chuck and Larry, Chuck and was it Chuck and Larry? Chuck and Billy and Chuck stuff, which was kind of funny. I'm not gonna lie, that shit was pretty funny at the time. It's probably toxic as hell nowadays, but some of that shit was actually pretty funny. But anyway, Kanyon would have definitely been the butt of the joke, and I'm pretty sure Kanyon wouldn't have wanted to been the butt of the joke. So if Vince couldn't make him the butt of the joke, Vince didn't fucking want him. So it is what it is. So Mitchell tells how he last saw Kanyon in like January or February of 2010 at this wrestling show, this independent show. Kanyon had this terrible match, and he was pretty bummed out about it. But after the show, they hung out at this bar, and Chris was just the life of the party, being jovial with people. And this random fan comes up to Chris Kanyon and tells him how, like, you're an inspiration to him, because this guy was also gay. And, he took it in stride. And then later, they were leaving, and Chris told Mitchell that his back was sore because he recently threw himself in front of a car in an attempt to kill himself. And then they got into this argument, and they were about to get into it, but then they decided to calm down, and they get in the car. Kanyon is going to drive Mitchell to the airport. And as they're driving, they're reminiscing about all the good times that they had. And when Mitchell got on the plane and he started crying and got back home, he told his wife he knew that was going to be the last time he was going to see that guy. And DDP talks about like he could tell that he probably was going to see Kanyon much longer after that. And as I always said, he was found dead in his childhood home on April 2nd, 2010. He had OD'd on antidepressant pills, and really, really fucking sad. And I know there's other people who were like wrestling journalists and reporters that talked about how Kanyon had messaged them not too long before he died, saying that he wanted to do interviews with them and he was going to reveal some secrets that he had that was going to devastate the business. But then he passed away, so who knows what he could have revealed. But it's a goddamn shame, especially seeing how innovative this guy was. 2010, if he could have kept going, and I saw someone mention this, he totally could have been a trainer at the Performance Center. Like, he could have been working in FCW. He could have been working with Triple H and NXT, because so many of these guys were, inspired by him and doing his moves and stuff. And he would have been a dope trainer if he just would have, kept his head on straight. But he had his demons and couldn't get past them. And really, really sad story, interesting story too. Like I said, I wasn't familiar with the guy, but like actually hearing the story, it's like, god damn, that's some wild stuff. And as I was saying to some friends, it's like Chris Kanyon is kind of the godfather of NXT, ROH, and AEW, because and I guess even Impact too, because he inspired so many of these young guys with their innovative styles. So a lot of these somewhat high flying, but like innovative moves and takedowns and stuff. But he did it very well. He didn't botch. Like, his shit wasn't botchy. His shit was still crisp. And I heard Eric Bischoff mention, like, he was very innovative, but he could also teach it as well. Some guys can do things, but they can't quite teach it. But Chris was able to do it and teach it. And like I said, another loss for the business. But really, really solid episode. Really surprised me. There's be these episodes where I'm like, I don't know about this, but like, this was another one that surprised me how good it was. And you should definitely check it out. Let me know what you thought about the episode in the comments. If you got any great Chris Kanyon moments or moments from the episode, let me know in the comments. And stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. Peace.